Betsy and Eric had asked for some scripture to be shared. It was a large part of the conversations that they had from the time they found out they were pregnant all the way up and through the last days at the hospital. I remember the night before all had come to pass. We talked about nothing but scripture and Ohio State basketball. And we can still talk about scripture, so that's a good thing. Paul's second letter to the church at Corinth says this: "That is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. If they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now, rather we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone. The things we cannot see will last forever. For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is, when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body, made for us by God Himself and not with human hands." If there is something that this passage tells us, is the universal condition that life is short. No matter how long we live or how briefly we live, in the long scheme of our days compared to eternity, there's a short timeline, and it calls for deep consideration. Noah has brought us together today to think about many of those things. King Solomon was considered the wisest man of the world in his day. In a time where travel wasn't easy, people would literally travel continents to hear him speak. And when he contemplated life and death, in the book of Ecclesiastes, he wrote that it's better to be in a house of mourning than a house of feasting, for that is the end of all men. Life for all of us has a start and an end. And life is from God and for His glory. We don't always know how to measure that. We measure the value of people based on so many temporary things. We value them based on what they do for us. We value them based on certain attributes of strength or intelligence quotient. We value them based on what we can see from our perspective and weighing out their value. God values that He gave them, that He created them in His image, and in the short time we know and live and have our being in Him, He's glorified in that. And in the long time after, He will give us rest in His presence. Noah was knit together in his mother's womb, and there was joy. The Westervelts talked about him and prayed about him, and via all the electronic medium we had, we were able to share that as a community. And when Noah was born, as you saw, there was great joy. He was hugged and kissed and touched by family and friends who were with him. He is a gift, and He is a lasting gift. In this life that is short, there was a man in the Bible who seemed to suffer greatly during his time. His name was Job. For a period of time, he seemed blessed and maybe even thought things were impenetrable. Things like sorrow would never touch him. He had the security of wealth. He had a large family, and he had his life. In a short period of time, he lost it. The wealth didn't stay. It never does. The children were killed, and his health had gone from him. And in the end, God doubled the wealth of the camels and the mules, and He doubled the prosperity of property. He didn't double the children. He gave them the same number. The message is clear. It should give us a question of why. Why not double them? Because they were never lost. They simply were relocated. And Job was given those children because his other children had never left. And so he was able to say, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Betsy and Eric wish that we share and reflect on Psalm 56, 7 through 9, which says of God, "You keep track of all our sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Life is short, but God is present. There's nothing more critical than that thought of if life is, as Job said, filled with adversity as sure as sparks fly upward, knowing that we are with God, not just on some later day, not just in moments of crisis, but in each day. It becomes critical. We will have questions and doubts, and undoubtedly the question why will come to minds today and will continue to come to mind as time goes on. I won't pretend that I have neat answers for the whys. I would hope that we will be people who will protect people from the ones who will want to give a neat answer of here's exactly why. But sometimes the questions are enough to make us sure that we can go to God and ask, what if? Jesus, in his life, was not immune to the pain of loss. He had 3 friends who seemed very dear to him. He would go to their house and find rest and enjoy their company. They were brothers and sisters, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. And then he was told one day that Lazarus was quite sick and would die. And Jesus intentionally told his disciples to wait. And by the time they arrived at the town of Bethany, Lazarus had passed. And in John 11, verse 21, it says, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. In verse 32, her sister Mary will come to Jesus, fall at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The question of why will be with us, and as a result, the statements of if. If this had happened, if things had gone another way. Jesus joins us in our suffering. God is not distant, he is present. But he presents them with another if. At the graveside, he says, Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? The whys are there, and the ifs will always be there. And the deepest answer we can ask for in belief is the presence of God with us. In the midst of storms and feeling dislocated, sailors of old looked for one thing when they were feeling lost and troubled, and that was an objective place to navigate by, a fixed point, when everything else was prone to change, and they would be able to navigate by the North Star. For those who have faith, God is that fixed point. The troubles and tribulations that come will shake us. The questions that are unanswered will remain often unanswerable by us. But we're able to find that fixed point and look to the one who shared in our sufferings and joined us. At 33, wrongly convicted of crimes he had never committed and being crucified, Jesus asked the wise, my God, why have you forsaken me? We join with a God who keeps track of our sorrows and tears. And we join with a Lord who is able to understand the why questions that we have and still remain present. After his resurrection, he promised that he had prepared a place for us and that we would join him. That brings me to the final scripture they would like us to reflect. The place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. There's a place yet to come of final rest and a final reunion. Jesus spoke from his throne to tell us this, and then to insist that it was true, because he no doubt understands in our suffering, with the tears we cry out to from earth, that we would be slow to believe that there could be a place of rest and reunion. A place that he says there are no more tears and no more suffering. A place where doctors no longer come and tell us dreaded news about loved ones. A place without NICUs and PICUs. A place where there's no pain. A place where there's no more grief over those things. And it takes a radical change. Jesus said that the old things will have passed and that all things will become new. In the end, it's because of the character of God that we can trust in the power of God and the promise of God. But there is a fixed point that Noah has been called to, and just as he gathered us here today, we will rally with him at that point in another time. In the hospital, Betsy and Eric asked me the difficult question: what do the scriptures say will happen to this infant when he dies to this world? I went to 2 Samuel chapter 12, where King David, the powerful man of the ancient Near East, had a 7-day-old infant who was dying. And it said, David therefore sought God on behalf of the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. And the elders of his house stood beside him to raise him up from the ground. But he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the 7th day the child died. The servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, behold, while the child was yet alive, we spoke to him. He did not listen to us. How then can we say to him, the child is dead? He may do himself some harm. But David saw his servants were whispering together. David understood the child was dead, and David said to his servants, is the child dead? They said, he is dead. Then David arose from the earth, washed and anointed himself, changed his clothes, and went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. He then went to his own house, and when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. Then the servant said to him, what is this thing that you have done? You fasted and wept for the child while he was alive. But when the child died, you arose and ate food. He said, while the child was still alive, I fasted and I wept, for I said, who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me and the child may live. But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? No. I shall go to him. He will not return to me. We are grateful for Noah. Noah was and is a gift of life from God. We released him just as King David did, when there was nothing more that the king's physicians or he could do, or even his prayers. It was a greater power that had to take over in the life of that child and with Noah. And we trust his character, this one who is still with us. And we will gather with him in that place. The ifs and whys we may never have answers for, but the statements that were emphatically true, behold, I am making all things new, we longingly wait to come to pass. Eric and Betsy are going to come up at this time and share some things with us that they want us to know and be a part of. And I think a couple of friends are going to work with them as well.